The night my husband told me to apologize to his family or start packing, everyone at that dinner table thought I would lower my head like I always did. They expected tears. They expected excuses. They expected me to beg for peace in a room where nobody had ever protected mine. But this time, I looked at my sleeping 3-year-old son in the next room, looked back at my husband, and quietly decided that the next bag I packed would not be for a weekend at his mother's house. It would be for a new life in another country. My name is Elena Marlowe, and when this happened, I was 34 years old. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for almost 7 years. We had a little boy named Noah, who had just turned 3, with soft brown curls, serious blue eyes, and the kind of laugh that could make a terrible day feel survivable. For a long time, Noah was the reason I stayed calm. When Daniel's mother criticized how I dressed him, I smiled because Noah was watching. When Daniel's sister made jokes about my cooking, I changed the subject because Noah was listening. When Daniel's father called me too sensitive at every holiday dinner, I swallowed my answer because I didn't want Noah growing up around shouting. I told myself silence was maturity. I told myself patience was love. I told myself one day Daniel would notice how much I was carrying. But the truth was much uglier than that. Daniel noticed. He simply found it easier to let me carry it. His family was not openly cruel in a way strangers would immediately recognize. That would have been simpler. They were charming when guests were around. They posted birthday photos. They hugged loudly. They used words like family unity and tradition and respect. But behind those words was a system. His mother, Vivian, decided what was acceptable. His sister, Monica, repeated it with a smile. His father, George, ended every disagreement by saying, "That's just how mothers are." And Daniel, my husband, the man who had once promised to build a life with me, transformed into someone smaller whenever they entered the room. At home, Daniel could be gentle. He could make pancakes with Noah on Sunday mornings. He could rub my shoulders when I was tired. He could laugh with me over terrible movies and bring me tea when I had a migraine. But around his family he disappeared. Not physically, worse. He became their witness, their shield, their echo. If Vivian said I was overprotective, Daniel would say, "She only means well." If Monica joked that I acted like motherhood was a medical degree, Daniel would say, "Don't make it serious." If George dismissed me, Daniel would say, "Dad's old school." Old school. That was the excuse for everything. Old school meant Vivian could take food from Noah's plate after I said he couldn't have it. Old school meant George could make comments about how women today wanted too much independence. Old school meant Monica could call me dramatic for asking people not to kiss my child on the mouth when he was sick. And if I objected, I was not protecting my family, I was attacking theirs. That is how they trained me. Not with one massive betrayal, with 1,000 tiny corrections. A look across a dinner table, a sigh after I spoke. A private message from Monica saying, "You embarrassed Mom?" A quiet argument with Daniel on the drive home where he would grip the steering wheel and say, "Why can't you just let things go?" I let so many things go that eventually I barely recognized my own hands. The gathering that changed everything happened on a cold Saturday evening in late November. Vivian and George were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, and Daniel's entire extended family came to their house. There were cousins, aunts, neighbors, old church friends, and people I had met only twice but who somehow still felt qualified to discuss my marriage. Vivian had spent weeks planning the event. She wanted it to look elegant but effortless, which meant everyone else had to work extremely hard while she pretended she had done it all alone. I had baked 2 trays of lemon bars the night before. I had ironed Daniel's shirt. I had packed Noah's pajamas, medicine, blanket, backup clothes, his little dinosaur cup, and the noise-canceling headphones he used when rooms became too loud. Daniel carried 1 bottle of sparkling cider inside and still received more praise than I did all evening. "Daniel, you're such a thoughtful son," Vivian said, kissing his cheek. I stood behind him holding Noah, the diaper bag, the dessert trays, and my purse. No one took anything from my arms, no one even noticed. That was normal. Inside, the house was glowing with warm lights and expensive flowers. Vivian had framed photographs from their marriage arranged on the fireplace mantel. George stood nearby telling the same 3 stories he told at every event. Monica moved around the room with a wine glass in her hand, greeting people like she was the hostess, even though she had arrived 15 minutes before us and brought nothing. Noah stayed close to my leg at first. Big gatherings overwhelmed him, especially at Vivian's house, because everyone wanted to touch him, lift him, feed him, pass him around like a trophy. I had already told Daniel in the car, please help me tonight. If your mom pushes boundaries with Noah, I need you to back me up. He had nodded without looking away from the road. I will, he said. I wanted to believe him. That was my first mistake. The first hour passed peacefully enough. Noah played with blocks in the den while I kept one eye on him and helped Vivian's cousin set out appetizers. Every so often Vivian would call Daniel over to introduce him to someone, praising his promotion, his kindness, his loyalty. Nobody mentioned that I had helped him rewrite the proposal that got him that promotion. Nobody mentioned that I had stayed up with Noah 3 nights in a row so Daniel could prepare for the interview. That didn't bother me as much as it should have. I was used to being the invisible support beam in Daniel's life. Then dinner began. 2 long tables were pushed together in the dining room. Vivian insisted that she and George sit at the head. Daniel sat beside his mother. Monica sat opposite him. I ended up 3 chairs away, with Noah on my lap because he didn't want the booster seat. Vivian had dragged out of storage without cleaning. Halfway through dinner, Vivian reached across the table and placed a spoonful of creamy casserole onto Noah's plate. I stopped her gently. Vivian, please don't give him that, it has mushrooms. She paused, spoon still in the air. So? He had a reaction last time. His pediatrician said we should avoid them until his allergy appointment. The table quieted in that subtle way families do when they sense conflict and immediately choose entertainment over kindness. Vivian smiled, but her eyes sharpened. Alina, it's a small bite. I understand, but no, he can't have it. Monica leaned back in her chair and laughed under her breath. Oh, here we go. I looked at her. What does that mean? It means Noah is going to grow up afraid of food if you keep treating dinner like a hospital chart. A few people chuckled. Not loudly, but enough. Noah leaned into my chest. I felt something hot rise in me, but I kept my voice even. I'm following medical advice. That isn't fear, it's responsibility. Vivian placed the spoon down with exaggerated care. You always make everything sound so dramatic. Daniel stared at his plate. That hurt more than Monica's laugh. Because he knew. He had been there when Noah's face broke out in red patches. He had been there when Noah vomited for an hour. He had heard the doctors say to avoid mushrooms until testing was complete. He knew this was not drama. But in that room, truth had less power than Vivian's mood. George cleared his throat. In our day, children ate what was put in front of them. And in your day, I said before I could stop myself, people also ignored allergies until children ended up in emergency rooms. The silence after that sentence felt like glass cracking. I had not shouted. I had not insulted him. I had simply said something true. But truth was the one thing Daniel's family found most offensive. Vivian's hand went to her chest. Excuse me? Monica put down her glass. Wow. Daniel finally looked at me, but not with support. With warning. Alina, he said quietly. Just my name. But I knew what it meant. Stop. Shrink. Fix this. I looked at my husband and something inside me refused. No, I said. The room went completely still. Daniel blinked. What? I said no. I'm not going to pretend this is harmless. You all keep pushing boundaries with Noah, and every time I say something, I'm treated like I'm ruining the family. Vivian laughed once, cold and offended. So now we're dangerous? I didn't say that. You implied it. I said I'm his mother, and when I say no to something involving his health, the answer needs to be no. Monica leaned forward. You don't get to come into this family and act like everyone is beneath you. There it was, the oldest trick. Turn a boundary into an insult. I looked around the table. People were staring, some with discomfort, some with judgment, some with open curiosity, as if my humiliation had become the evening's entertainment. No one is beneath me, I said, but I'm tired of being treated like I'm beneath all of you. Daniel's face flushed. Alina, enough. I turned to him slowly. Enough what? Enough making a scene. The words landed with a dull, familiar pain. A scene. Not a mother protecting her child. Not a wife asking her husband to stand beside her. A scene, I almost laughed. Instead, I looked at him and said, Your son had a medical reaction. Your mother ignored that. Your sister mocked it. And you're embarrassed by me? Daniel pushed his chair back. Don't do this here. Where should I do it, Daniel? In the car later, where you can tell me I should have handled it better. In our kitchen tomorrow, where you'll say your mother is old-fashioned. In bed next week, where you'll pretend none of this happened. A few people gasped. Vivian stood up. I will not be spoken to like this in my own home, and I will not let my child be used as a test of obedience. Daniel's expression changed. I had seen him angry before, but this was different. This was panic dressed as authority. He looked at his family, then at me, then back at his family, and I understood something with sudden clarity. He was not angry because I was wrong. He was angry because I had made him choose publicly, and Daniel hated choices that required courage. He pointed toward the hallway. Calm down, I stayed seated. No, Monica whispered. Unbelievable, Vivian said. Daniel, are you going to let her disrespect us like this? That sentence did it. I watched my husband straighten as if his mother had pulled a string attached to his spine. He looked at me with everyone watching. Apologize to my mother, he said. My hands went cold. No. His jaw tightened. Alina, no, Daniel. I won't apologize for protecting Noah. The room held its breath. Then Daniel said the sentence that ended our marriage as I knew it. If you can't respect my family, then pack your bags and leave. For 1 second, I truly heard nothing. Not the clink of silverware, not the heat blowing through the vents, not Noah's soft breathing against my shoulder. Only that sentence. Pack your bags and leave. He said it like a punishment. He said it like a door slammed in my face. He said it because he believed I had nowhere to go. And in that awful silence, I realized he had never imagined what would happen if I actually left. Noah stirred in my arms. Mommy, he whispered. That tiny voice pulled me back into my body. I looked down at my son. His cheeks were pink, his eyes were wide. He had heard enough to be frightened, even if he couldn't understand the words. That was the moment my decision formed. Not as rage, not as revenge. As a quiet, complete sentence inside my mind. My son will not learn that love means watching his mother be humiliated. I stood carefully. The chair legs scraped against the floor. Daniel looked relieved for half a second because he thought I was going to apologize. Instead, I picked up Noah's bag from beside the chair. Alina, he said. I didn't answer. I walked to the den, collected Noah's blanket, his stuffed fox, his little dinosaur cup, and the headphones. Behind me, voices rose. Vivian said something about disrespect. Monica said I was being manipulative. George muttered that young wives didn't know how to keep a family together. Daniel followed me into the hallway. Where are you going? I put Noah's coat on him. You told me to leave. I didn't mean like this. I zipped Noah's coat slowly. That's the problem, Daniel. You never mean the damage, you only mean the control. His face hardened again. Don't twist this. I lifted Noah into my arms. I'm not twisting anything. I'm finally listening. Then I walked out of Vivian's house with my son on my hip and my marriage breaking behind me. Nobody stopped me. That is the part I remember most. Not one person at that table stood up and said enough. Not one person told Daniel he had gone too far. Not one person followed me into the cold to ask whether Noah was okay. They let me leave because they thought leaving would teach me a lesson. They were right. Just not the lesson they intended. At home, I put Noah to bed in his room. He clung to my neck longer than usual. Daddy mad, he whispered. I closed my eyes. Daddy made a mistake, I said softly. Grandma mad? Yes, baby. Mommy bad? My heart cracked. I held him tighter. No, Mommy is not bad. He fell asleep with one hand wrapped around the sleeve of my sweater. Afterward, I sat on the kitchen floor because the chairs felt too formal for the kind of breaking happening inside me. The house was quiet. Daniel had not come home yet. My phone lit up again and again. Vivian, you owe this family an apology, Monica. You embarrassed everyone tonight, George. A wise woman knows when to keep peace. Daniel will talk when you calm down, when I calm down. Not when he apologized. Not when he asked about Noah. When I calmed down, I read those messages until something strange happened. I stopped crying. There comes a point when pain becomes information. And that night, every message was evidence. Evidence that they did not see me. Evidence that they did not respect my motherhood. Evidence that Daniel believed my fear of conflict was stronger than my need for dignity. At 1:13 in the morning, I opened the bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet and pulled out a blue folder. I had not touched it in almost 4 years. Inside were old documents from before my marriage began to suffocate me. A job offer from a small educational technology company in Portugal. Emails from my former mentor, Clara, who had moved to Lisbon and built a language learning platform for immigrant children. A copy of my dual citizenship paperwork through my mother, my European passport. Noah's passport application notes. I had once planned to go. Before Daniel, before pregnancy. Before Vivian convinced everyone that a good wife built her life around her husband's family. Clara had offered me a position when Noah was a baby. I turned it down because Daniel said international moves were too much stress. Vivian said taking Noah away from family would be selfish. Monica joked that I wouldn't last 3 months without Daniel fixing everything for me. So I stayed, and over time I made my life smaller enough to fit inside their approval. But sitting on that kitchen floor with my son asleep upstairs, after asking whether I was bad, I understood something. Approval from people who benefit from your silence is not love. It is a leash. I opened my laptop. My fingers shook as I typed Clara's name into my email search bar. The last message from her was nearly 2 years old. Elena, if life ever changes and you want to talk, the door is open. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I wrote back. Clara, is the door still open? I did not explain everything, not yet. I simply said I needed to make a serious change and asked if the company was still hiring. I expected to wait days. She answered in 40 minutes. It is always open for you. Call me when you can. I pressed my hand over my mouth and cried without sound, not because everything was solved. Because for the first time in years, someone had offered me a door instead of a demand. Daniel came home at almost 2 a.m. I heard his key turn. I closed the laptop and placed the blue folder back in the drawer. He found me standing by the sink. He looked tired, irritated, and still certain he was the injured party. Mom is devastated, he said. No hello. No where is Noah. No I'm sorry. Mom is devastated. I looked at him and realized I had been married to a man who believed his mother's embarrassment was more urgent than his wife's heartbreak. That must be hard for her, I said. He stared at me, confused by my calm. Are you seriously going to act like this? I'm not acting. You humiliated me in front of everyone. No, Daniel, you humiliated me. I just stopped helping you hide it. His face tightened. You need to apologize. There it is again. What need? He threw his hands up. You insulted my parents in their home. I protected our son after your mother ignored his medical restriction. She made a mistake, and then defended it. You could have handled it privately. I've tried privately for 7 years. He looked away. That was how I knew he heard me. Daniel was not stupid. That made everything worse. A clueless man can be taught. A selfish man can only be exposed. I'm sleeping in the guest room, I said. He scoffed. Fine. I walked past him. Elena, he said behind me. I stopped. You're making this bigger than it is. I turned around. No, Daniel. I'm finally admitting how big it always was. He did not follow me the next morning. I woke before Noah and called Clara from the guest room closet because it was the only place in the house where I felt hidden. She listened quietly while I told her the short version. I did not cry until I said, I don't want Noah to think this is normal. Clara's voice softened. Then don't let it become normal. She told me the company had grown. They needed someone with my background in curriculum design and family outreach. The position could start remotely, then transition to Lisbon. She could connect me with a relocation advisor, a housing contact, and a lawyer familiar with cross-border family situations. A lawyer, that word mattered. Because I was angry, but I was not reckless. Noah was not luggage. He was my child, and I would not turn his life into a secret escape built on fear. I needed to do this legally, carefully, with records and notice and protection. By noon, Clara had emailed 3 contacts. By Monday, I had a consultation with a family attorney. Her name was Marisol Reyes, and she did not waste words. Do not disappear, she said. Do not act from emotion. Document everything. We will look at your rights, Noah's documents, current custody status, medical concerns, and whether relocation is possible. But if you move, you do it cleanly. Cleanly. That became my private word for the next 6 weeks. Not dramatically, not cruelly, cleanly. I began building my exit the way someone builds a bridge in darkness, one plank at a time. First, I gathered documents. Noah's medical records, the pediatrician's allergy notes, copies of messages where I had told Daniel's family not to give him certain foods, screenshots of Vivian dismissing me, messages from Monica calling me controlling, Daniel's text telling me to apologize. Then I gathered financial records. That part changed everything, because for years Daniel's family had treated me like an outsider who contributed nothing. Vivian loved saying Daniel carried the household. Monica once joked at a barbecue that I was lucky Daniel tolerated my little education job. What none of them mentioned was that my little education job paid half our mortgage. What Daniel had hidden from them was worse. 3 years earlier, George's printing business had nearly collapsed. Daniel asked if we could help with a short-term loan. I agreed under one condition. It had to be documented and repaid. Daniel promised it would be. It never was. Over time, the loan became smaller in everyone's memory and larger in reality. Daniel kept asking for temporary help. Equipment repairs, tax penalties, payroll gaps, emergency supplier payments. I had transferred money from my personal savings more than once, because Daniel said his parents were desperate and too proud to ask anyone else. But apparently not too proud to insult me in rooms I helped pay for. By the time I added the numbers, The total was just over $48,000. $48,000. I sat at the dining table staring at the spreadsheet while Noah colored beside me. My hands went numb. That money had come from savings my mother left me when she died. Money I had planned to use for Noah's education, for emergencies, for a life that had choices in it, and Daniel had allowed his family to believe he was the generous son. Not us, not me. Him. That discovery did something useful to my grief. It gave it bones. For the next few weeks, I lived two lives. In one life, I was Daniel's quiet wife, still making lunches, still reading bedtime stories, still answering politely when Vivian sent cold messages about moving forward as a family. In the other life, I was interviewing with Clara's company, meeting Marisol, collecting school information in Lisbon, researching neighborhoods near parks, checking pediatric clinics, and quietly separating my finances. Every night after Noah slept, I worked. I built budgets. I scanned records, I changed passwords, I opened a new bank account. I found a short-term furnished apartment near Clara's office. I applied for the job formally and cried when the offer came through. The salary was not enormous, but it was stable. The company offered relocation support. There was childcare assistance. The work mattered. For the first time in years, my future did not look like an apology. Daniel noticed something was different, but he misunderstood it. He thought my calm meant surrender. That is one of the strangest things about people who control through pressure. When you stop reacting, they assume they have won. Daniel became almost cheerful. He brought home flowers one evening and placed them on the counter like a receipt for emotional labor. "Can we be normal again?" he asked. I looked at the flowers. "What does normal mean?" he sighed. "Alina, I'm asking. It means not punishing everyone forever." There it was. Everyone, not us, not me, everyone. I trimmed the stems and placed the flowers in water. "I'm not punishing anyone." "Then come to Mom's birthday brunch next Sunday." "No," he blinked. "No, No and I are busy." His expression darkened. "You can't avoid my family forever." I almost said, "Watch me." Instead, I said, "I'm not available." He stepped closer. "This is exactly what I mean. You're making me choose." I turned then. "No, I'm asking you to choose. There's a difference." He looked genuinely offended. "My family matters. So does yours." He frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" I glanced toward the hallway where Noah's little shoes sat by the door. "It means you keep forgetting the family you created because you're busy obeying the one you came from." For once, he had no quick answer. But he still did not apologize. Instead, he slept with his back to me that night as if distance was discipline. By the fourth week, Marisol had enough documentation to file for legal separation and temporary parenting arrangements. Because I had dual citizenship, a formal job offer, documented support abroad, and strong evidence that Daniel had repeatedly failed to support Noah's medical boundaries, she believed relocation could be requested properly. It would not be simple. Nothing involving a child ever is. But I was not trying to erase Daniel. I was trying to protect Noah from a household where my authority as his mother could be overturned by anyone with the last name Marlowe. Marisol prepared everything. The hardest part was not signing the papers. It was looking at Noah over breakfast the next morning while he lined blueberries around his plate and realizing he had no idea the world beneath him was moving. "Mommy," he said, holding up a blueberry. "This one looks like Grandpa." I smiled because I had to. "Does it?" Wrinkly. I laughed so hard I almost cried. Children do that. They throw light into rooms adults have filled with smoke. I promised myself again that whatever happened, I would not let my bitterness become his childhood. Then came the final gathering. I did not plan to attend, Daniel insisted. His parents were hosting a reconciliation dinner, which was such a beautiful phrase for an ambush that I almost admired it. Vivian wanted everyone back under one roof. Monica said it would be healing. George said family disagreements had gone on long enough. Daniel said, "Just come, let them say their piece, then this can be over." "What piece?" I asked. He rubbed his forehead. "Alina, please." There was desperation in his voice now, but not the kind I needed. He did not want to understand. He wanted relief. Marisol advised me not to engage emotionally, but she also said something else. "If you feel safe attending and you want a final record of how they speak to you, keep your phone recording where legal. But do not provoke, let them show themselves." So I went. Not for reconciliation, for confirmation. I wore a navy dress. I packed Noah's safe dinner in his little blue container. I charged my phone fully and placed it face down in my purse. Recording before we walked in, Vivian opened the door with a smile that belonged in a photograph, not real life. "Alina," she said, touching my arm, "I'm glad you decided to be reasonable. I almost turned around right there. But Noah ran past her toward the toy basket and I followed. Dinner was smaller this time. Vivian, George, Monica, her husband Daniel, me, Noah, and 2 of Daniel's aunts. The table looked perfect. White candles, linen napkins, roasted chicken. Wine glasses catching the light. It smelled like rosemary and performance. For the first 20 minutes, everyone behaved. Too well. Vivian asked Noah about preschool. Monica complimented my dress. George said the weather had been strange. Daniel looked relieved, as if peace had been restored by everyone pretending not to remember who had broken it. Then Vivian placed her fork down. "Elena, I think we should clear the air." There it was, the theater curtain lifting. I took a sip of water. "Okay." Vivian folded her hands. "I want you to know I forgive you." Daniel closed his eyes for half a second. Monica nodded solemnly like a judge approving a sentence. I looked at Vivian. "For what?" Her mouth tightened. "For the way you spoke to us. For taking Noah out of the house that night. For upsetting Daniel. For making this family feel like we are strangers." I set my glass down carefully. "I don't need forgiveness for leaving after my husband told me to leave." George groaned. "Don't start again." "I'm not starting anything. I'm clarifying." Monica leaned forward. "You always do that. You make everything sound calm, but it's manipulative. Being calm is not manipulation." "No, but acting like a victim is." Daniel said, "Monica, enough." It was the first time he had corrected her in front of me. For one foolish second, hope moved in my chest, then he ruined it. "Elena knows she contributed to this too." I stared at him. There it was, the compromise he had built in his mind. His family would stop attacking me so loudly. I would accept partial blame for being attacked. That was his version of peace. Vivian looked satisfied. "Yes, exactly. We all made mistakes." I nodded slowly. "What mistakes did you make?" The table froze. Vivian blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "You said we all made mistakes. I'm asking which mistakes were yours." Monica laughed. "This is what she does," Daniel whispered Elena. "No, I'd like to know." Vivian's face hardened. "My mistake was loving my grandson enough to be involved. I felt something inside me close like a door. There it was. Not remorse, rebranding." I looked at Daniel. "Do you agree with that?" He hesitated. "Just 1 second, but 1 second can answer 7 years of questions." "I think Mom loves Noah," he said. "That wasn't my question." "Elena, don't interrogate me." I leaned back. "I'm not. I'm giving you one last chance to tell the truth." Vivian stood so quickly her chair bumped the wall. "How dare you come into my home and threaten my son?" Noah looked up from his plate. My voice stayed low. "I'm not threatening anyone." "You are poison," Vivian said. "You have been pulling Daniel away from us since the day you married him." Daniel pushed his chair back. "Mom, no," she snapped. "I am done being polite. She thinks because she gave us a little money years ago, she owns this family." My entire body went still. A little money, years ago. Daniel's face went white. So he had told her. Not the full amount, obviously, but enough. Monica's eyes narrowed. "What money?" Vivian realized too late that she had said something Daniel did not want said. George looked at Daniel. "What is she talking about?" The room shifted. For once the attention moved away from me. Daniel stood. "Can we not do this now?" I almost smiled, not because it was funny. Because after years of being cornered at their table, Daniel had finally found himself in the chair he built for me. Monica looked between them. "Daniel?" I reached into my purse and stopped the recording. Then I pulled out a slim envelope. Not the full legal packet, not yet. Just 1 page, a repayment summary. I placed it on the table. "The amount was not little," I said, "and it was not years ago. The last transfer was 8 months ago." George picked up the paper with shaking hands. His eyes moved down the page. $48,620. The room went silent, real silent this time. Not offended silence, exposed silence. Monica grabbed the page from him. "What is this?" "A record," I said, "of the money I transferred to help your parents' business. Money Daniel told me was a documented loan. Money no one has repaid." Vivian's face drained of color. Daniel whispered my name. "Elena," I looked at him. "Don't." George was staring at the paper as if it had insulted him. "You gave Daniel this money?" "No. I sent most of it directly to vendors, payroll, and overdue accounts at Daniel's request. I have the confirmations." Monica turned to Daniel. "You said you handled that." Daniel said nothing. That was answer enough. Vivian sat down slowly. For the first time since I had known her, she looked old, not physically, strategically. Like someone whose power had depended on everyone looking in the wrong direction. I stood. "Noah and I are going home now." Daniel stepped toward me. "Wait." I looked at him with a calm I had paid for in years. "You told me to pack my bags, Daniel." I listened. His eyes flickered. "What does that mean?" "It means you'll be served Monday." The room seemed to tilt. "Served?" Monica said. Daniel shook his head. "Elena, don't be ridiculous. There are legal papers, separation, temporary custody arrangements, financial disclosure, and relocation request." "Relocation?" Vivian's voice cracked. I picked up Noah's container and blanket. "Yes." Daniel's face changed completely. "Where are you going?" I did not answer him immediately. I helped Noah put on his coat. "Mommy, we leaving?" "Yes, sweetheart." Daniel followed me into the hallway, lowering his voice. "You can't just take my son." I turned sharply. That was the first time that night my calm almost broke. "Our son, and I am not just taking anyone. I have followed legal advice from the beginning. You will have notice, contact, court dates, and every opportunity to be his father. But you will not use your family as a courtroom against me anymore." He looked terrified now, not because he had lost me, because he had lost the version of me who absorbed consequences for him. Vivian appeared behind him. "You ungrateful woman." Daniel spun. "Mom, stop." She ignored him. "After everything this family has done for you." I laughed once. I couldn't help it. It was a small laugh, but it cut through the hallway. "Vivian, I paid your payroll." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I opened the front door. Cold air rushed in. Daniel whispered, "Please don't do this." I looked at him one last time in that house. "I begged you for years to stand with me. You waited until standing with me cost you something." Then I walked out. This time Daniel followed. He stood on the porch in the cold without a coat, watching me buckle Noah into the car. "Elena," he said, voice breaking, "can we talk tonight?" I closed Noah's door. "No." "Tomorrow?" "No." "When?" "When my lawyer says it's time." His eyes filled with tears. 7 years earlier, that would have undone me. But I had learned something. A man's tears after consequences are not the same as remorse before harm. I got in the car and drove away. Monday morning, Daniel was served at work. That was not my decision. Marcel handled it through proper channels. But I will admit, when I imagined him sitting in his glass office reading the documents, I wondered whether he finally understood what it felt like to be exposed in a room where he wanted respect. His call started at 11:42. I did not answer. His messages came next. "Please call me." "We can fix this. You're scaring me. My mother is a mess." I stared at that one for a long time. My mother is a mess. Even then, even after the legal papers, even after the money, even after everything. His first instinct was still Vivian's emotional weather. I sent one reply. "Communicate through Marisol unless it concerns Noah's immediate needs." Then I put my phone down and took Noah to the park. The next weeks were brutal. Anyone who tells you leaving is one clean heroic moment has never actually done it. Leaving is paperwork. Leaving is nausea before court hearings. Leaving is packing toys while your child asks whether daddy will know where his dinosaur pajamas are. Leaving is waking at 3 in the morning convinced you are ruining everything, then remembering that staying was ruining you. Daniel fought the relocation at first. Of course he did. Vivian pushed him. Monica posted vague quotes online about women who weaponize children. George told relatives I had manipulated Daniel financially, which was bold for a man whose business had survived on my mother's savings. Then discovery began. That is the legal word for what happens when people who hide behind family stories are asked to produce documents, bank records, messages, emails, medical notes, loan confirmations, the recording from the reconciliation dinner, the texts from Vivian, the messages where Daniel admitted Noah's allergy restrictions and still minimized my concerns. It is amazing how quickly she's dramatic becomes quieter when receipts enter the room. Daniel's lawyer advised settlement. I know because Daniel told me later, not proudly. The temporary agreement gave me permission to relocate with Noah for the job, while establishing structured video calls, holiday visits, and review dates. Daniel would have a path to rebuild trust as a father, but not through Vivian, not through pressure, not through surprise family ambushes. The financial issue became separate, but documented. George's business had to acknowledge the debt. That alone almost destroyed Vivian. Not the money, the acknowledgement. For years, she had built her identity around being the generous matriarch whose family needed nothing from outsiders. Now there was a paper trail proving the outsider daughter-in-law had quietly kept the lights on. When the agreement was signed, I went home and sat on the floor of Noah's room with 3 open suitcases around me. Noah placed his stuffed fox in one. "Fox coming too," he said. "Of course. Daddy coming?" I paused. "No, baby. Daddy will visit and you'll talk to him on the tablet." He thought about that. "Grandma?" My chest tightened. "Not right now." He nodded with the strange acceptance of small children, then asked if airplanes had snacks. I hugged him so he wouldn't see my face. The night before our flight, Daniel came to the house. Marisol had approved a goodbye visit. I made sure Clara knew the time. I made sure my neighbor was aware. I hated that I thought in precautions now. But caution is not cruelty when history has taught you to protect yourself. Daniel arrived with a small backpack of gifts for Noah, a coloring book, a toy airplane, and a framed photo of the two of them at the zoo. Noah ran to him. "Daddy." Daniel dropped to his knees and held him so tightly I had to look away. For 20 minutes, they played on the living room rug. Daniel made airplane sounds. Noah laughed. It hurt because love can exist inside failure. That is what makes leaving complicated. When Noah went to the kitchen for juice, Daniel stood. He looked thinner. "Elena," he said, "I'm sorry." I folded my arms not defensively but to hold myself together. "For what?" He swallowed. "For that night. I waited for telling you to leave. I waited for not backing you up about Noah. I waited again." His eyes dropped. "For letting them treat you like you were the problem because it was easier than confronting them." That one entered the room differently. It had weight. I nodded once. "Thank you." He looked almost startled. "That's it? What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. I thought maybe that I'd cancel the flight because you finally said something true." He flinched. "I deserve that." "No," I said. "You deserve to sit with it. That's different." He looked toward the kitchen where Noah was singing to himself. "I don't know how I let it get this bad." I believed him, but not enough to change my mind. "Little by little," I said. "That's how." He wiped his eyes quickly. "My mom keeps saying you planned this to punish us. Your mother thinks every boundary is revenge." He almost smiled, then didn't. "I told her she can't contact you." That surprised me. "For how long?" "As long as it takes." I studied him. "Did you tell her that before or after your lawyer explained the recording?" Pain crossed his face. "After." I appreciated the honesty more than the timing. Noah came back with juice on his shirt, and the moment passed. When Daniel left, he hugged Noah again. Then he stood in front of me awkwardly, like he wanted to hug me too but had lost the right to assume he could. "Safe flight," he said. "Thank you." He opened the door, then stopped. "Elena?" "Yes? When you get there, will you tell him I love him?" I felt tears rise. "He knows." Daniel nodded, walked to his car, and sat there for several minutes before driving away. I closed the door quietly, then I finished packing. The airport the next morning felt unreal. Fluorescent lights, rolling suitcases, coffee smell, families half awake, announcements echoing overhead. Noah wore his little backpack with a fox keychain and held my hand like the world was an adventure instead of an ending. At security, my phone buzzed. Vivian. I ignored it, then Monica. Ignored, then Daniel. I hesitated, then read his message. "Mom knows your flight is today." I did not tell her details. "She is threatening to come to the airport." I told her no, "I'm sorry." For once, Daniel had chosen before disaster. That did not fix the past, but it changed the morning. I typed back, "Thank you." 2 words. Clean at the gate, Noah pressed his face to the window. "Big plane." "Yes," I said. "Very big." "Going new home?" I knelt beside him. "Yes, we're going to a new home." "With park?" "With a park. And snacks?" "Definitely snacks." He nodded seriously, satisfied with the legal and emotional foundation of our relocation. As boarding began, I felt something unexpected. Not joy, not victory, grief. For the marriage I had wanted, for the family I had tried to build. For the version of Daniel who might have stood up years earlier and changed everything with one sentence. But grief is not a stop sign. Sometimes grief is just proof that you loved something enough to mourn it while still leaving. When the plane lifted off, Noah fell asleep against my arm before we reached cruising altitude. I looked down at him and whispered a promise he could not hear. "You will never have to watch me disappear to keep other people comfortable." The first months in Lisbon were not magical. I want to be honest about that. The apartment was small. The washing machine sounded like it was full of rocks. I got lost constantly. Noah cried for Daniel at bedtime. I cried in the shower because that was the only place Noah couldn't see. My job was good, but demanding. The language barrier exhausted me. Simple errands became complicated. I missed familiar grocery stores. I missed my old bed. I missed having someone else in the house after Noah fell asleep, even if that someone had failed me. Freedom is beautiful, but at first it can feel like standing in an empty room with all the lights on. Still, slowly, life began to soften. Noah started preschool near our apartment. On the first day, he cried so hard I nearly took him home. On the third day, he hugged his teacher. By the second week, he was saying obrigado to everyone, including pigeons. We found a bakery where the owner gave him a tiny roll every Friday. We found a park with blue swings, We found a pediatrician who listened the first time I explained his allergies. That alone made me cry in the office. The doctor noticed. "You are used to fighting to be believed," she said gently. I laughed because if I didn't, I would sob. "Yes. You don't have to fight here." I carried that sentence for days. "You don't have to fight here." Daniel called Noah on schedule. At first the calls were awkward. Noah would show him toys, then wander away. Daniel would try too hard, asking question after question until Noah got overwhelmed. I coached him once through email. Ask fewer questions. Tell him one funny thing from your day. Let him lead. To his credit, Daniel listened. Their calls improved, then Daniel started therapy. He told me during a co-parenting call, voice careful as if the words were fragile. "I found someone who specializes in family enmeshment." I had never heard Daniel use that word before, enmeshment. I almost looked around to see whether someone else had entered the call. "That's good," I said. He nodded. "It's uncomfortable. Growth usually is." He gave a small, sad laugh. "Yeah, I'm learning that." Vivian did not improve quickly. People like Vivian rarely surrender control because it is the right thing to do. They surrender when control stops working. She sent emails through Daniel at first. Long ones. Emotional ones. She said I had broken her heart. She said Noah needed his grandmother. She said she hoped one day I would understand the pain I caused. I read the first two. Then I told Daniel I would not receive messages from her unless they contained accountability and respected the legal boundaries. For once, he did not argue. Months later, a letter arrived. A real letter, forwarded through Marisol. Vivian's handwriting was sharp and elegant. "Elena, I am sorry for speaking about you in ways that made you feel unwelcome." I stopped reading. "Made you feel," that old escape hatch. Not "I made you unwelcome," "made you feel." I placed the letter in a drawer and did not answer. Another came 6 weeks later. This one was shorter. "Elena, I am sorry I ignored your decisions as Noah's mother. I am sorry I treated your boundaries like insults. I am sorry for the things I said at dinner. I understand now that access to Noah is not something I am owed. If you ever allow me to rebuild trust, I will follow your rules." I read that one 3 times. Then I cried. Not because I forgave her, because a part of me had waited 7 years to see those words in any form. I did not invite her back into our lives immediately. Forgiveness and access are not twins. One can exist without the other. But I sent a response through Marisol. "Thank you for acknowledging this. I am not ready for direct contact. If that changes, I will communicate through the proper channel." Clean. Again that word, clean. By then, my life had developed a rhythm. Work, preschool, park, dinner, bath, story. Calls with Daniel. Quiet evenings with tea by the window. Clara came over on Thursdays. We laughed about office gossip and sometimes talked about painful things without dressing them up. One evening she asked, "Do you miss him?" I watched rain slide down the glass. "I miss who I thought he could be. That's not the same." "No," I said. "It isn't." I did miss Daniel sometimes. Not the version who pointed toward the door. Not the man who let his mother rule our marriage. I missed the man who knew how I took my coffee. The man who cried when Noah was born. The man who once drove 40 minutes in a storm because I wanted soup from a specific restaurant. But you can miss someone and still know they were not safe for your heart. That is a hard truth. It is also a freeing one. The real turning point came almost 9 months after we left. Daniel flew to Lisbon for his first extended visit with Noah. The agreement allowed supervised transition time first, then daytime outings. He arrived nervous, carrying a suitcase full of gifts I had specifically told him not to overdo. "Noah needs you, not a toy store," I said at the apartment door. Daniel looked embarrassed. "I know." I panicked. "That is the most honest thing you've said all year." He smiled weakly. Noah ran to him, thrilled. "Daddy, I know pigeons in Portuguese." Daniel looked confused. "You know pigeons?" Noah nodded proudly. "Pombo!" Daniel laughed, and for a second the room felt like it could have been another life. We spent the first afternoon together at the park. Not as a family exactly. More like 3 people learning the shape of something after a storm. Daniel pushed Noah on the swing while I sat on a bench nearby. I watched them, my chest aching with a complicated tenderness. Later, while Noah played in the sand, Daniel sat beside me. "I need to tell you something," he said. I looked at him. My parents sold the cabin. I blinked. The cabin was Vivian's pride. A small lake property they used every summer and mentioned constantly. Why? To repay part of the business debt. I stared at him. He continued. "Dad didn't want to. Mom really didn't want to. But their accountant told them the records were clear. And Monica found out more than they wanted her to." I looked toward Noah. "Did you make them?" "No. But I stopped protecting them from the facts." That sentence settled between us. I stopped protecting them from the facts. It was not a grand romantic declaration. It did not undo years of pain, but it was the kind of sentence Daniel should have learned long ago. I'm glad, I said. He nodded. I also told Mom she can't see Noah during my visits unless you approve it. I studied his face, and what did she say? He laughed once, exhausted. She said you turned me against her. Of course. I told her no. I said, my silence turned me against my wife, and I'm trying not to let it turn me against my son too. I looked at him then, really looked. For the first time, I saw not a man asking me to make things easier for him, but a man beginning to understand the cost of easy. That must have been hard, I said. It was. Good. He looked surprised, then nodded. Yeah, good. By the end of that visit, Daniel and Noah had rebuilt a small bridge. Not enough to erase the distance, but enough for Noah to trust that Daddy could leave and come back when he said he would. That mattered. When Daniel left for the airport, Noah cried. I held him while Daniel stood in the doorway with tears in his eyes. He did not ask me to comfort him. He comforted Noah. That mattered too. A year after the dinner at Vivian's house, the final divorce hearing took place over video. It was calm, almost painfully ordinary. Documents reviewed, agreements confirmed, financial repayment scheduled, parenting plan finalized. When it ended, I sat at my kitchen table in Lisbon and stared at the blank screen. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt quiet. Then Noah came running in wearing one sock and a superhero cape. Mommy, can we make pancakes for dinner? I looked at him, this wild, beautiful child who had become braver in a new country than I had been in my old life. Yes, I said, absolutely. We made pancakes. We burned the first two. We ate the rest with strawberries. Noah got flour on his nose. I took a picture and almost sent it to Daniel, then did, because co-parenting was not punishment. He replied, pancakes for dinner, bold choice. I wrote back, your son's idea, he replied. Of course it was. That was our relationship now. Not repaired into marriage, not poisoned into war. Something cleaner. Something with boundaries strong enough to hold kindness without letting it become access to harm. 2 months later, Vivian saw Noah for the first time over a supervised video call. It lasted 10 minutes. She cried before it started, but to her credit, she did not make Noah responsible for her feelings. She showed him a wooden train she had kept for him. He showed her his stuffed fox. She asked about preschool and did not criticize his hair, his food, his schedule, or me. After the call, she sent one message through, Daniel. Thank you for allowing that. I will keep following the rules. I read it twice and put the phone down. Maybe people can change. Maybe some only change when the cost of staying the same becomes too high. Either way, I had stopped building my life around waiting for it. That was the real victory. Not that Vivian apologized. Not that Daniel went to therapy. Not that the money was acknowledged. Not even that I left the country. The victory was that my peace no longer depended on their understanding. One evening, almost 18 months after we arrived in Lisbon, Noah and I walked home from the bakery. The sky was pink and gold over the rooftops. He held a paper bag with 2 rolls inside and kept stopping to inspect cracks in the sidewalk like they were ancient maps. Mommy, he said suddenly, yes? Were you scared on the big plane? I looked down at him. Children ask the real questions when adults think the story is over. Yes, I said. I was very scared. But we went. I smiled. Yes, we went. He thought about that, then nodded. Sometimes scared goes too. I stopped walking. What did you say? He looked up, confused. Sometimes scared goes too. Like when I went preschool. I crouched in front of him and brushed crumbs from his sweater. You're right, baby. He grinned and kept walking. I stayed there for 1 extra second because my 3-year-old had just explained courage better than any adult ever had. Sometimes scared goes too. I think about that whenever someone asks whether I regret leaving. They expect a simple answer. No, because my life improved. No, because Daniel needed consequences. No, because Vivian deserved it. But the truth is deeper. I regret that leaving became necessary. I regret that my son had to hear his father speak to me that way. I regret every year I taught myself to endure what I should have questioned. But I do not regret choosing the door when it finally opened. I do not regret the flight. I do not regret the paperwork, the fear, the small apartment, the lonely nights, the hard conversations, the court dates, the awkward calls, the slow healing. Because on the other side of all that pain was a life where my son sees me laugh freely. A life where no one feeds him food I have said no to just to prove they can. A life where my voice does not shake when I set a boundary. A life where love is not measured by how much disrespect I can survive. If you have ever been made to feel cruel for protecting your peace, remember this. People who profit from your silence will call your voice betrayal. That does not make them right. It means your voice is working. The last time I saw Vivian in person was during Daniel's second visit to Lisbon. She came with him after months of following every boundary. I agreed to one afternoon at a public garden. She looked smaller outside her own house. Power often does. Noah ran ahead with Daniel to look at the fountain, leaving Vivian and me standing beneath a tree filled with purple flowers. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I thought if I admitted I was wrong, I would lose my place in the family." I looked at her. "And?" She watched Noah laughing by the fountain. I lost more by refusing. It was the closest thing to wisdom I had ever heard from her. I did not hug her. I did not pretend we were healed, but I said, "That's a start." She nodded. Tears slipped down her face. And this time she wiped them herself. That mattered. Daniel walked Noah back over. And for one strange peaceful moment, the four of us stood together without performance. No one demanded an apology. No one corrected my parenting. No one tried to win. Noah handed Vivian a fallen flower. "For you," he said. Vivian looked at me first, not for permission to love him, for permission to respond. I nodded. She took the flower carefully. "Thank you, Noah." On the walk home later, Daniel said, "I keep thinking about that night. If I could go back," I stopped him gently. "You can't. I know. You can only decide who you are after it." He looked at Noah, skipping ahead. "I'm trying. I know. And I did know. But knowing did not mean returning. That is another thing people misunderstand. Healing does not always rebuild the same house. Sometimes healing means you can stand near the ruins without wanting to live there again. Daniel and I never remarried. We never became one of those dramatic stories where the husband realizes everything, runs across an airport, and the wife falls into his arms while music swells. Real life is quieter. He became a better father. I became a freer woman. Noah became a child who knew both parents loved him, but also knew that love did not require people to live inside pain. That was enough. More than enough. Years later, when I think back to that anniversary dinner, I no longer remember every insult clearly. I don't remember exactly who gasped or who whispered. I don't remember the pattern on Vivian's napkins, or the taste of the food I barely ate. But I remember Daniel pointing toward the hallway. I remember Noah's small voice asking if Mommy was bad. I remember the blue folder in my kitchen drawer. I remember my hand shaking when I emailed Clara. I remember the plane lifting through clouds while my son slept against me. And I remember realizing, somewhere above the ocean, that the people who told me to leave had no idea they were giving me back to myself. Daniel thought he was drawing a line I would be afraid to cross. Vivian thought shame would pull me back into place. Monica thought the family story would bury the truth. George thought money could be forgotten if nobody said the number out loud. But they all forgot one thing. A woman who has been quiet for years has had years to collect the truth, and when she finally moves, she does not always slam doors. Sometimes she books a flight. Sometimes she packs snacks for her child. Sometimes she leaves a legal envelope on the table. Sometimes she starts again in a city where nobody knows her as difficult, dramatic, disrespectful, or ungrateful. They only know her as herself. And that was the woman I had been trying to become all along. So no, I did not apologize that night. I packed. Not because I wanted to destroy a family, because I was finally brave enough to save one, my own.